The orbital defense station hung in silence, broken only by the rhythmic pulse of life support systems and the occasional crack of stressed metal. Commander Velix of the Thrain Confederacy stood before the tactical display, her 4 eyes tracking the desperate situation unfolding below on Corvinus Prime. 3 months. 3 brutal grinding months since the Kresh All Armada had descended upon the mining colony, and still the siege held. Barely. Commander, another supply shuttle just got vaporized trying to break through their blockade, Lieutenant Morven reported, his scales shifting to a sickly gray. That makes 17 this week. We have maybe 4 days of rations left in the underground shelters. 5 if people stop eating entirely, which, let us be honest, seems unlikely, given the whole staying alive thing. Velix's mandibles clicked in frustration. The Kresh all were nothing if not thorough. Their siege craft was legendary, perfected over 600 years of constant warfare. They had positioned their dreadnoughts in a perfect orbital net. Their ground forces had established a perimeter around the colony's main gate that even a quantum tunneler could not penetrate, and their patience was infinite. They would wait until every Thrain inside starved, then walk in and claim the richest titanium deposits in the sector without firing another shot. Elegant, efficient, absolutely infuriating. What about the reinforcement fleet? Velix asked, though she already knew the answer. Still 2 weeks out minimum. The Kresh all blockade at the Helios jump gate is holding strong. Our ships cannot punch through without sustaining catastrophic losses. Morven paused, his claws tapping nervously against his data pad. Commander, there is one other development. Oh, good. I was worried this situation might be too straightforward. The humans responded to our distress call. Velix's eyes widened slightly. The humans, the mad little primates from that death world in Sector 7. The ones who categorize recreational activities by how likely they are to cause bodily harm. The very same, apparently, they consider siege warfare a particular specialty. Something about their history being essentially one long series of people trying to keep other people out of places or get into places people were trying to keep them out of. Their representative said, and I quote, "We have thoughts on walls. How many ships are they sending?" Morven's scales flickered. Ships none, they are sending one. Consultant, he arrives in approximately 6 hours. Velix stared at her lieutenant for a long moment. One. They are sending one human. Apparently, that is all they can spare. At the moment, something about a situation involving 3 separate rebellions, a dimensional incursion, and a wedding that has gotten, and quote, really out of hand, but they assured us this particular human has extensive experience with siege situations. Extensive experience. Velix's laugh came out as a chittering rasp. Morven, we have 12,000 civilians trapped behind walls designed to withstand orbital bombardment, surrounded by 40,000 Kresh, all shock troops who have not lost a siege in living memory, and Earth's grand contribution is one consultant who probably has thoughts about walls. Spectacular. Truly, someone alert the historians, because this is how the Thrain colony at Corvinus dies, not with a bang but with a very well-informed human taking notes from orbit. Should I refuse the assistance? Velix sighed, her shoulders sagging. under the weight of command. No, at this point I would accept help. From a sentient fungus if it claimed to. Know something about breaking sieges. Have a shuttle ready to retrieve our expert the moment he arrives. The hours crawled past with agonizing slowness. Velix reviewed tactical data until the symbols blurred together, each report more grim than the last. The creche all had tightened their perimeter by another 30 m. Food riots had broken out in shelter. 7. A child had died from an infected wound because they had run out of basic antibiotics 2 weeks ago. The sort of small, crushing details that made command feel less like leadership and more like watching a catastrophe in slow motion. When the alert finally came that the human transport had arrived, Velix made her way to the docking bay with Morvan in tow. She had studied humans, of course. Everyone in the Confederacy military had, after their frankly disturbing performance during the creche border conflicts. Bipedal omnivores from a planet that seemed designed specifically to kill its inhabitants. Humans had evolved in an environment so hostile that their idea of relaxation involved deliberately triggering their own fear responses for entertainment. They had something like 200 words for different types of fighting, viewed controlled explosions as an acceptable problem-solving tool, and possessed a truly baffling tendency to adopt any creature they encountered as a pet, regardless of its capacity for violence. The footage from their home world had given Velix nightmares for weeks. Oceans that could swallow continents. Storms that lasted for months. Predators at every level of the ecosystem, including microscopic ones. And the humans just lived there, thrived there, built cities and highways and amusement parks specifically designed to simulate the experience of dying without the inconvenient permanence of actual death. Still, she had expected someone imposing, a grizzled warrior covered in scars, perhaps, or one of their special forces operators, the ones who could apparently hold their breath for impossible lengths of time and break bones with their bare hands. The human who stepped off the transport shuttle stood perhaps 1.7 m tall, built lean rather than bulky, with skin the color of aged bronze and dark hair pulled back in a simple tail. He wore practical gray fatigues with no visible rank insignia, carried a single weathered pack over one shoulder, and had the most unsettling eyes Velix had ever seen. Not because they were strange in color or shape. Human eyes were actually rather pleasant, all things considered. No, these eyes bothered her because they were calm, deeply, profoundly calm, like pools of still water that hid unknown depths. Commander Velix. The human's voice was smooth, almost gentle, with an accent she could not quite place. I am Marcus Webb, thank you for the extraction. Your pilot has excellent reflexes. We only almost died twice on the way through that blockade, which I believe might be a personal record. Velix blinked all four eyes in succession. You are the siege consultant. Guilty as charged. Marcus smiled, showing the flat teeth of an omnivore. Not the fangs of a predator, but not the grinding plates of an herbivore either. Teeth that could eat almost anything. Adapt to almost any diet. Generalist teeth. Survivor teeth. I know I might not look like much, most humans do not until the situation calls for otherwise. We are what you might call context-dependent threat assessors. Your species has a concerning number of Phrases that sound pleasant until you think about them too carefully, Morven muttered. You have no idea, Marcus agreed cheerfully. So shall we review the tactical situation? I understand we have a timeline measured in days rather than weeks. They made their way to the command center, Velix pulling up holographic displays of the siege positions. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful as she laid out the grim mathematics of their situation. The crash all forces, the orbital blockade, the dwindling supplies, the civilian population slowly dying behind walls that had become a prison rather than a protection. When she finished, Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he leaned forward, studying the hologram with those unsettling calm eyes. This is actually quite good, he said. Finally, Velix stared at him. Good? You think this situation good? Well, good for us. Terrible for the creche all once we get started. Marcus pointed at the massive gate that sealed the colony's main entrance. See, the thing about sieges is that they rely on a fundamental assumption. The assumption that walls keep things in. But walls, my dear commander, are really just very aggressive suggestions about where one should and should not be. And humans have been ignoring suggestions since we figured out how to walk upright. The gate is 40 m of reinforced Durasteel, Morven said flatly. The walls are 60 m high, embedded with sensor grids and automated defenses. The creche all have artillery positioned to obliterate anything that moves within a kilometer of the perimeter. This is not a suggestion. This is physics. Marcus's smile widened slightly. Physics? Right. You know what is funny about physics? It applies to everyone equally. The creche all built this siege assuming the people inside would try to escape or that reinforcements would try to break in from outside. They have optimized their entire defensive strategy around those two scenarios. He tapped the hologram, zooming in on the gate. But what if we do something they are not expecting? What if we do not try to get out or get in? Then what exactly are we trying to do? Velix asked, though a small part of her brain was beginning to suspect she might not enjoy the answer. We are going to break the gate. Silence fell over the command center like a heavy blanket. Break it, Velix repeated slowly. You want to break the gate that is specifically designed to withstand everything short of a direct nuclear strike. Not want will, there is a difference. Marcus pulled up his data pad, fingers flying over the surface. See, I have been studying Creshaw siege doctrine during the trip here. Fascinating stuff, very thorough. They account for explosive breaching, plasma cutting, kinetic bombardment, even quantum tunneling, but you know what they do not account for. Please say something reassuring. Mechanical stress failure induced by sustained localized force application. Marcus looked up, his calm eyes gleaming with something that might have been excitement. The creche all built that gate to withstand sudden catastrophic forces. Bombs, artillery, the physics of explosion and impact. But Durasteel, for all its impressive properties, has a crystallization threshold when subjected to continuous pressure at specific stress points. You cannot blow it up, but you can break it. Given enough force applied correctly, over enough time, the molecular bonds will fail catastrophically. Morven's scales had gone completely gray. And how exactly do you propose applying this force? Our heavy equipment is inside the colony. We have no siege weapons, no industrial machinery, nothing that could generate the kind of pressure you are describing. Marcus set down his data pad and looked at them both with that same unsettling calm. You have me, you, Velix said, 1 human against 40 m of reinforced durasteel. I prefer to think of it as durasteel against 1 human. The framing matters. Marcus stretched his arms over his head, joints popping in a way that made Morven flinch. Look, I understand your skepticism. Your species did not evolve on Earth. You did not spend millions of years learning to be persistent hunters, running prey into exhaustion across endless plains. You did not develop the ability to regulate body temperature so efficiently that you can operate at peak performance for hours while other creatures collapse from heat stroke. You did not build civilizations by moving rocks that should not be movable, constructing pyramids and walls and monuments using nothing but time, leverage, and sheer bloody-minded refusal to accept the word impossible. He rolled his shoulders, and Velix noticed for the first time the way his muscles moved under his skin. Not bulky, no, but dense, coiled like springs waiting to release. Your people are pragmatists, Marcus continued. You see an obstacle, you calculate the efficient path around it. That is smart, that is sensible. But humans, we see an obstacle in our first thought is, how do I go through it? Our second thought is, can I break it? Our third thought is, I wonder if anyone has broken one of these before. And our fourth thought, the one that really defines us, is, I bet I can break it faster. This is insane, Morven whispered. Probably, Marcus agreed, but here is the beautiful thing about insanity. It is only insane until it works. And then it is called innovation. So, Commander Velix, do you want to sit up here and watch your people starve while following all the sensible, pragmatic strategies that have gotten you precisely nowhere? Or do you want to see what happens when a human decides that a gate is really just a very thick door, and doors are meant to be opened? Velix looked at this strange, calm human with his impossible proposal and his unsettling confidence. She thought about the children dying in the shelters below, the families rationing their last scraps of food, the veterans who had survived 3 wars, only to face death by starvation behind their own walls. What do you need? She asked. Marcus's smile was sharp as a knife. A shuttle that can get me down there without being vaporized. Some water. Lots of water. Humans are mostly water, and I'm about to lose quite a bit of it. And a direct comm link to the colonies command center so I can warn them before things get loud. That's it. That is it. Oh, and tell your people to keep those creshaw. I work better without interruptions. 3 hours later, Velix watched from orbit as Marcus Webb stood before the Corvani's gate. The Creshaw had noticed him, of course, how could they not? A single human walking calmly across the scorched earth of no man's land, heading directly toward the gate like he was out for a morning stroll. Their snipers had taken shots. Their artillery had fired warning rounds. But Marcus moved with an eerie precision, his path weaving through the bombardment like he could see the shells coming, which, knowing humans, he probably Could. He reached the gate and placed both hands against its surface. Then he pushed. Nothing happened at first. Velix could see the human's body tense, muscles standing out like cables under his skin. His breathing became measured, controlled, in and out, in and out. The sort of breathing that spoke of techniques refined over thousands of years. This is ridiculous, Morvan said. He is just standing there. The Cresciol are probably laughing themselves sick. But Velix noticed something. The way Marcus had positioned his feet, the angle of his spine, the placement of his hands. Every element of his body had become a lever, a mechanism for transferring force. And humans, she remembered from her studies, had spent their entire evolutionary history learning to transfer force efficiently. They were not the strongest species, not the fastest, not the most durable, but they understood leverage in a way that came from 10,000 generations of moving rocks they should not be able to move. Hours passed. Marcus did not stop, did not rest. His clothes darkened with sweat. Steam rose from his skin in the cold air, but he kept pushing, his body locked in that same impossible position, generating continuous force against an immovable object. Except Velix realized it was not quite immovable anymore. The sensors were picking up something. Micro vibrations in the gate's structure, tiny stress fractures propagating through the molecular lattice. The durasteel was beginning to sing, a low harmonic note that grew steadily louder as the hours crawled past. He is actually doing it, Morvan. Breathed, that insane primate is actually doing it. Marcus pushed and pushed and pushed. The Cresciol had stopped laughing now. They had started reinforcing the gate from their side, trying to shore up the structure, but they were working against something they did not understand. Human endurance, human stubbornness, the fundamental human conviction that any problem could be solved if you just refused to quit long enough. Somewhere around the 18-hour mark, Marcus spoke for the first time since he had started. His voice came through the comm link, raspy but clear. Commander Velix, tell the people inside to get clear of the gate. They have about 90 seconds. How can you possibly know that? I can feel it breaking. Every human can feel when something is about to fail. We evolved that skill, tracking injured prey, listening for the moment when the target's body gave up. Same principle, bigger target. He took a deep breath and Velix saw his muscles bunch one final time. 60 seconds now, you might want a shield. Your eyes. The gate screamed. It was not a sound Velix had words for. Metal tearing at the molecular level. Bonds that had held for decades suddenly failing all at once. The durasteel shattered like glass, 40 m of reinforced armor exploding inward. A cascade of fragments that hit with the force of artillery shells. The shockwave knocked every Cresciol soldier within 100 meters off their feet. Marcus stood in the center of the destruction, hand still raised, steam rising from his body like he was on fire. When he spoke, his voice carried across the battlefield with perfect clarity. Message to the Cresciol commander. The gate is open. The siege is broken. If you would like to continue, you will need to come inside and face 12,000 angry, very hungry Thrain who now have absolutely nothing left to lose. Or you can withdraw to a safe distance and negotiate terms like civilized Beings. Your choice. You have 5 minutes to decide before I start working on your artillery positions. Velix watched the Kreshal forces, saw them looking at this single human who had just done the impossible, saw them calculating the odds, saw them begin to withdraw. I think, Morven said quietly. I understand now why the galaxy finds humans so unsettling. Velix did not respond. She was too busy watching Marcus Webb walk calmly back toward the extraction point, leaving a broken gate and a shattered sea doctrine in his wake. Just another day's work, his posture seemed to say. For a human. The extraction shuttle touched down in a cloud of dust and debris, its pilot clearly eager to retrieve Marcus before the crash all changed their minds about retreating. Velix watched through the command center's main viewport as the human climbed aboard, moving with the careful deliberation of someone whose muscles had been pushed to their absolute limit. Good. At least he was not completely indestructible. That would have been too disturbing. Commander, we are receiving multiple transmissions from the Kreshal fleet. Morven announced, his scales flickering between gray and a healthier green. They are requesting immediate negotiations. Their ground commander is using words I have never heard before in any diplomatic context. I think several of them might be threats, disguised as compliments. Patch them through to conference room 3. I want full security protocols and recording devices active. Velix turned toward the docking bay. And someone get Marcus Webb to medical. I do not care what he says about being fine. That man just spent 19 hours pushing against a Durasteel gate. He needs fluids, rest, and probably psychiatric evaluation. By the time Velix reached the docking bay, Marcus was already refusing medical attention with the polite stubbornness that she was beginning to recognize as a distinctly human trait. I appreciate the concern, truly, he was saying to a very flustered Thrain medic. But I have done worse during my morning workout routine. Well, not recently, but back when I was training for the sea of Carthex's 7, I once held a blast door closed for 36 hours straight while civilians evacuated behind me. This was actually relatively pleasant by comparison. No one was shooting at me directly. The weather was mild, and I got to focus on pure mechanical application rather than split my attention between multiple threats. The medic looked helplessly at Velix. Commander, his core temperature is still elevated. His muscle tissue is showing signs of severe strain, and his hydration levels are dangerously low. See, Marcus said brightly. Dangerously low, not critically low. That is practically perfect health for a human operating in adverse conditions. He accepted a water container from a supply officer and drained it in one long pull. Besides, we have negotiations to handle. The Kreshal are going to be in a very interesting psychological state right now, and I would hate to waste the opportunity. Velix studied him carefully. His hands trembled slightly as he set down the empty container. Sweat still dampened his collar, but his eyes remained clear, focused, utterly present in a way that suggested he was running on something beyond physical reserves. You are not going to rest until this is completely finished, are you? She asked. Would you? If 12,000 lives depended on seeing this through to a proper conclusion. Marcus met her gaze steadily. Commander, breaking the gate was the easy part. Anyone with sufficient knowledge of material science and decent endurance could have managed that, given time. The hard part comes now. We need to convert a military defeat into a lasting peace. And we need to do it before the crash. All High Command decides to save face by bombarding the colony from orbit. Morven's scales went gray again. They would not dare. That would be a clear violation of the Galactic Accords. The Galactic Accords were written by species who negotiate from positions of strength. Marcus said quietly. The Kresh all just watch their perfect siege doctrine shatter like cheap glass. They are humiliated, angry, and desperate to regain their dignity. Desperate people do desperate things. He started walking toward the conference room, his stride steady despite the obvious fatigue. So let us give them a way to be dignified in defeat. Trust me, I have ended enough sieges to know that how you win matters almost as much as winning itself. The conference room was already prepared. When they arrived, holographic displays showed the Kresh all-ground commander, a massive individual with chitinous armor and enough battle scars to stock a museum. General Kravex, if Velix remembered the intelligence reports correctly, 300 years old, veteran of 47 campaigns, and utterly merciless in pursuit of military objectives. He looked furious. You bring a human to these negotiations. Kravex's voice came through with a static hiss that did nothing to diminish its impact. Is this meant as an insult? A demonstration of your new pet weapon? General Kravex, Marcus said before Velix could respond, his voice carrying none of the earlier lightness. This was a different tone entirely. Command voice, the kind that made you stand straighter without thinking about it. I am Marcus Webb, independent military consultant. I was the one who broke your gate. And before you waste time posturing about insults and weapons, let me be clear about something. You did not lose this siege because you were weak. You did not lose because your tactics were flawed. You lost because you were fighting the wrong battle. The Kresh all general's eyes narrowed to slits. Explain. You laid siege to Corvanis expecting a war of attrition. Food, water, morale. The classic calculations, and by every reasonable metric you were winning. Another week, maybe two, and the colony would have surrendered without you firing another shot. Marcus leaned forward slightly. But sieges have a fundamental weakness. They assume static conditions. They assume the walls remain walls, the gates remain gates, and everyone plays by the established rules. You assumed wrong. You proved that quite dramatically. Kravex said coldly. 19 hours of sustained force application. Very impressive for a species known primarily for dying foolishly in pursuit of pointless goals. But breaking one gate does not break a siege. We still have 40,000 troops in orbital position. We can still bombard that colony into rubble. You could, Marcus agreed, absolutely. But then what? You destroy the colony, kill everyone inside, and claim the titanium deposits. Except now the entire galaxy knows that the legendary Kreshel siege doctrine failed against one human with determination issues. Every species you have conquered will start wondering if maybe you are not quite as invincible as advertised. Every future siege will have people asking, what if they bring a human? What if there is another Marcus Webb? What if we try something unexpected? Silence filled the conference room. You are trying to frighten me with hypotheticals. No, General. I am offering you something far more valuable than victory through destruction. I am offering you dignity in strategic withdrawal. Marcus pulled up a holographic display of the Corvani system. Here is what I propose. You pull back your forces to the outer system. Not a full retreat, just a tactical repositioning. You claim that the siege was a demonstration of military capability, not an actual attempt at conquest. A show of force to remind the sector that the Kresh will remain a power to be reckoned with. You even throw in something about respecting the tenacity of the defenders. Very magnanimous, very civilized. And in exchange, Kravex asked warily, the Thrain Confederacy agrees to establish a formal trade delegation with the Kreshal Empire. Titanium deposits get shared, not hoarded. Both sides profit, both sides save face. And nobody has to write the extremely embarrassing after-action reports that would come from either bombarding the colony or admitting you got outmaneuvered by one consultant. Marcus smiled slightly. Plus, and I cannot stress this enough, you avoid setting a precedent where every contested siege in the galaxy suddenly features humans showing up to break things in creative ways. Because I promise you, General, I am not the scariest thing my species has to offer. Not even close. Velix watched the Kreshal general's face cycle through several emotions. Anger, calculation. And GT, clears throat. And GT, grudging respect. The universe had just shifted under his feet, and he was smart enough to recognize when pushing forward would cost more than retreating. You speak with authority for someone who claims to be merely a consultant, Kravex said finally. I speak from experience. I've broken 17 sieges in my career. General, 14 ended in negotiated settlements. The other 3 ended in ways that still give me nightmares, and I would very much like to avoid adding a 4th. The lightness had drained completely from Marcus's voice now. War is easy. Any fool can destroy things. Peace is hard. Peace requires everyone involved to be clever enough to find the path that lets all parties walk away with their dignity intact. So I am asking you as one professional to another, be clever with me here. The silence stretched out for nearly a minute. Then Kravex's posture shifted slightly. A gesture Velix recognized from her studies of Kreshal body language. Acceptance. The Kreshal Empire agrees to your terms. We will reposition to the outer system and establish preliminary trade negotiations through appropriate diplomatic channels. He paused. But I wanted on record that this outcome was achieved through mutual strategic assessment, not because we feared one human. Absolutely, Marcus said smoothly. The official record will reflect that the Kreshal demonstrated their military capabilities effectively, and that both sides chose the path of profitable cooperation over continued conflict. Very sensible, very professional. You are a dangerous individual, Marcus Webb. Only when necessary. The rest of the time I am quite pleasant. I bake bread as a hobby. After the transmission ended, Velix found herself staring at the human consultant with new understanding. He had not just broken a siege. He had rewritten the entire tactical situation, converted military humiliation into diplomatic opportunity, and done it all while making the Kreshel general feel clever for accepting the terms. That was remarkable, she said quietly. Marcus shrugged, and the motion made him wince slightly. That was necessary. Violence should always be the last resort, and when you do resort to it, you should aim for the kind that solves problems rather than creating new ones. Breaking the gate got everyone's attention. The negotiations turned that attention into something useful. He accepted another water container from a passing crew member. Now, if you will excuse me, I really do need to sit down before I fall down. Turns out pushing against Dorasteel for 19 hours is actually quite tiring. Despite what I told your medic, you lied to my medical staff about your condition. I exaggerated my wellness for tactical reasons. There is a difference. Marcus headed toward the door, then paused. Oh, one more thing. When you make contact with the civilians in the colony, tell them what happened. All of it. They deserve to know that help came. That someone cared enough to try the impossible on their behalf. Stories matter, Commander. The story of the human who broke the gate will give them something to hold on to during the recovery. And recovery from siege trauma is its own kind of war. He left before Velix could respond. 3 days later, after the Kreshel had withdrawn to the outer system and preliminary trade negotiations had begun, Velix stood in the colony's central square watching the reconstruction efforts. The gate had been cleared away, its fragments already being analyzed by engineers who could not quite believe the molecular stress patterns. Around her, Thrain civilians moved with the careful energy of people rediscovering hope. Marcus Webb sat on a piece of rubble nearby, sharing ration bars with a group of children who kept touching his arms, like they expected him to be made of something other than flesh and bone. He answered their questions with patience, explaining in simple terms how leverage worked, how persistence mattered, how walls were really just puzzles waiting to be solved. You know what the veterans are calling him? Morven asked, approaching from the supply depot. Earthborn Doom. They say he cracked the siege gate barehanded, that the Kreshel took one look at him and remembered why you do not corner humans. The story is already spreading through the military networks. Earthborn Doom, Velix repeated, testing the words. He told me he bakes bread as a hobby. Humans contain multitudes. It is one of their more disturbing qualities. Morven watched as Marcus demonstrated basic physics principles using a stick and a rock, the children hanging on his every word. He leaves tomorrow, you know, another contract waiting. Something about a hostage situation on Viridian Station that has everyone else stumped. Of course he does. Velix felt an odd twinge of something. That might have been sadness. Did we pay him yet? He refused payment. Said the look on that Kreshel general's face was compensation enough. Morven's scales flickered with amusement, though he did accept a case of that Thrain honey wine we produce. Apparently, humans have a remarkable tolerance for alcohol, and he wanted to test his limits. Naturally, that evening Velix found Marcus preparing his gear in the shuttle bay. His movements were still careful, muscles clearly sore from his exertions. But he worked with methodical efficiency. Leaving without saying goodbye, she asked, "I hate long farewells. Too much time for people to get emotional and say things they will feel awkward about later." Marcus secured the last strap on his pack. Besides, this was just another job. Successful outcome, minimal casualties. Everyone gets to go home happy. Standard consulting work. You broke a siege that should have been unbreakable. Should have been is not the same as was. Important distinction. He turned to face her fully. "Commander, I am going to tell you something that most species do not want to hear. Humans are not special. We are not gifted with magical abilities or impossible strength. We are just very, very good at refusing to accept limitations. Every capability I demonstrated here can be learned, trained, developed. We are not born unbreakable. We make ourselves unbreakable through practice and determination. That somehow makes it more impressive, not less." Marcus laughed, a warm sound that echoed through the shuttle bay. "You know what? You are right. It does." He extended his hand in the human gesture of farewell. "It was an honor working with you, Commander Velix. If you ever need someone to break something that everyone says cannot be broken, you know where to find me." She clasped his hand, noting the calluses, the strength, the simple humanity of the gesture. "Why do you do this? Travel from crisis to crisis, risking yourself for people you have never met. Because someone has to. Because sieges are where hope goes to die. And I refuse to let that happen if I can prevent it. Because every wall that stands represents someone trapped, someone suffering, someone waiting for help that might never come." Marcus's expression grew serious. "And because I know what it feels like to be on the other side of that wall, Commander, to be the one hoping someone cares enough to try the impossible. So, I try. Every single time." He boarded the shuttle without another word. Velix watched it lift off, carrying the strange human consultant back toward whatever crisis awaited him next. Around her, the colony continued its recovery. Children played in the square. Families reunited. Veterans swapped stories about the Earthborn who had cracked the siege gate, barehanded who had stared down the crescent and made them blink. Stories mattered, Marcus had said. And this story would spread. Already she could see it rippling outward. A reminder that walls could fall, that sieges could break, that sometimes impossibility was just another problem waiting for the right solution. And somewhere in the galaxy, she knew, Marcus Webb was already breaking another gate, solving another impossible problem, being someone else's Earthborn doom. Just another day's work for a human.